Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is in regards to training, and the question is, why 90%? So recently we got an email from a listener, and they were asking why in some strength training programs that the author recommends that they base the workouts off of 90% of the person's 1 rep max. So why 90% of their best ever lift? And I think this is a great question, and we're going to go through kind of all the reasons. And this is actually helpful for everyone to know, because it's going to relate to why we can't always necessarily expect our best every single time we go into the gym, and how it's realistic to understand that we're not always going to be at our best, and how you can modify or adjust that and kind of still get really good workouts, but not be surprised by that when we show up and we're not our best ever every single time. So basically we'll go through some common ones, and I'll kind of give you some reasons, and then we'll sum it all up at the end. But the first main reason why, myself included, is when I'm giving programming to kind of general population, I'll make sure I accommodate, write something in there for them not to use their best ever lift that they've only hit one time as like their judge for their strength level for the programming. And one of the main reasons why is because often the form that they used to get that 1 rep max was probably horrendous, and it didn't represent the best of their ability in the best positions. So if they had to use really horrible form to get that weight, then they're going to have to use really horrible form to get a certain percentage of that weight for reps. So for example, if you're 100%, let's just say your 1 rep max is 100% of what you can do. Typically most people can do 2 reps of 90% of their 1 rep max. But let's say your 100% looked like absolute crap, and it was like a bench press where you bounced it off your chest. You're going to have a hard time getting 2 reps at even 90%, because your form is probably have to be borderline correct to get it there, and you probably didn't use good form, you probably don't have good form when under major stress, under heavier loads. So you can kind of say, like, if we had used correct form, the person might only got 95% of their 100%. So they had to use bad form to get that extra 5%. Well, if you base an entire workout off that number that required bad form, it's more likely to require bad form to make the workouts work. So if I'm doing 90% for 2 reps, or 85% for, say, I'm trying for a set of 4 or 5 reps, then if I had to use bad form to get to 100, I'm probably going to have to use bad form to get those. So that's one main reason, is to accommodate for any kind of bad form variance that was required to get that 1 rep max. So the next thing we have is kind of to allow margin for progressive overload. So if we want to get stronger, when you work out, you present a stimulus to your body, and then your body has to adapt to that stimulus by hopefully getting stronger if we did the right sets of reps and the right volume and stuff. So what we want to do is we want to start our body off with a stimulus that's enough to get adaptation, but not at the very peak of what we're fully capable of, because then what are you going to do the next workout? So very often in progressive overloading for programming, people like myself, like we might program in, say, 4 to 8 weeks or even up to 12 weeks worth of some type of progressions. So I might have the person do, say, week 1 they do sets of 5s, and they're going to be able to get to a certain weight for sets of 5s. Then week 2 they do just go down to sets of 4. Since they're dropping a rep off, they probably will be able to move up in weight. So that's going to get them the progressive overload of a heavier weight onto their body system. That'll again shock their body a little bit and get it to adapt and move forward towards its strength progressions. Then in week 3, we drop from 4 reps down to 3 reps, and we get that same result. They can use a little bit heavier weight, therefore they get a little bit of a heavier overload onto their body, a little heavier stimulus, and they can get a little more strength progression. So if you do that kind of system where you go like say 5 reps for 1 week, then 4 reps, then 3 reps, then 2 reps, that gives you room to add weight to the bar. So we know we can do heavier weight for 4 reps than we could for 5. So that ensures or kind of makes it very likely that you'll be able to add weight to the bar and get that progressive overload of a heavier and heavier stimulus from week to week. So what I mean by that's not starting at 100%, is if you started at 100% and that was the best you've ever done, and we'll get more into what I'm about to say as one of our points later on, that means that you have to perform at your best every single time you're in the gym, and that's not likely. So you have to allow room or margin for life, for things to come in and be different. So if that was the best I could ever do on one day, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm that strong every day I go into the gym. And therefore, if I start my program at 100%, I'm starting it in the best case scenario, and I won't have margin for that progressive overload, for that ability to add weight or add difficulty to the stimulus from week to week to get more adaptation and change from my body. Then, the other thing we have is it allows for a slow progression of joint stress and overall body annoyance. So if we're coming into the gym and we're doing a lift to the best of our ability over and over and over again, that's going to be very shocking to our body. That requires a lot of work out of our body. It's going to push our body near its limits. Now, if we start that in week 1, where we're absolutely maxed out at its limits, then in week 2, we have to do a progressive overload. We have to make a harder stimulus. Well, what happens if that stimulus now starts to kind of be a little above and beyond what the body can really handle? And now by the time you come in for your 3rd workout or your 3rd week, your body hasn't really fully recovered yet from that 2nd week. Because that 2nd week was so much close to its limits, it wasn't able to get all the repairs done. So now you have just like a joint or maybe a muscle or something that's a little bit behind in recovery. But you do the workout anyhow, you kind of fudge it, you make it work. But then the next week you come in, it's even further behind in recovery, and now all of a sudden you have a nagging, annoying pain in your elbow or shoulder or wrist or something like that, or a muscle, kind of like a stabby muscle pain. So by starting at a lower amount of weight, like say 90%, that allows you to kind of get several workouts in, several weeks in, before your joints and stuff would be pushed to their max, and your recovery might not match the level of stimulus and the frequency of training that you want. So sometimes in strength training, you'll hear people taking a deload, which means that they're going to push their body really hard for a certain number of weeks, say 8 weeks. And then they know by the end of the 8 weeks, their elbows kind of hurt, their body's kind of hurting, the body's a little bit beat up. So they might take 1 week where they drop their volume down and give that body a little extra ability to recover. The downside is, if you program incorrectly, people will often dig too deep of a hole that they can't recover from in just 1 week. So they'll kind of create a chronic issue that started in week 3 that continued through to week 8, and then they think taking 1 week off is going to work. It will not. So they buried too deep of a hole, and their programming was way too aggressive for their body, so for their joints and their overall systems. So too often people think strength training means you have to beat the living crap out of yourself. It doesn't. You just have to stimulate a change for the day. And it took me till I was, I'm not old, but older than when I first started lifting weights at 16. It took me a while to recognize that I didn't have to go into the gym and hashtag kill it and go hashtag beast mode all the time. So there's an optimal amount of training versus like a maximal amount. So too often when I was younger, I'd go to the maximum of like every ounce of effort my body could handle for the day, even if it was way above and beyond what would have been necessary for results. So now that I'm smarter and now that I'm in charge of a lot of people, I ensure that I definitely do not beat them up. So actually, for most clients I work with, we don't even have deload weeks because I'm always controlling the level of stress onto their body in small 4-week waves. So I never let it really build up long enough that they have a chronic annoyed issue. So it does happen because, powerlifting is powerlifting. And sometimes you push your body a little bit further than what it can handle, or sometimes you don't come in with the same food or the sleep, or you're overly stressed. There's something where you didn't quite come in the same, so they cause a little more stress. So maybe they'll have like their elbow hurts like 1 or 2 weeks in a row, but usually we'll modify the training to where they're still active, but we bring down the stress on that joint. And that would be by changing different positions, different exercises, finding more isolative movements around the joint rather than heavy compound movements. We still keep them moving, absolutely, but we find ways to reduce the amount of stress caused per workout, and that allows their recovery to catch up per workout. So that's the idea of starting at 90% or a sub-maximal weight. It allows you time to see how well your body's recovering, and you can modify and adjust your workouts while you're still healthy, rather than going really heavy right away, running into problems right away, and then playing catch up the whole time, or trying to play repair the whole time, rather than being able to move forward how you'd really like to. And then the last thing we have, the last point we want to make, is to by using only 90%. It allows for daily swings in energy and strength. So very often when we went into a gym and we went to set our 1 rep max, maybe it was even a competition, a lot of things were in our favor. Maybe we went to the gym exactly when we wanted to. We had the meal exactly when we wanted to before the gym. Maybe we did it on the weekends, so we were less stressed and less hurried. There was just maybe differences to the moment of when we hit our 1 rep max versus when we're always going to be training for the rest of your entire programming. So even if you came in on a day and just hit a random 1 rep max on a really bad day and you didn't even want to be in the gym, but your nervous system was all spiked up from being kind of stressed and tired, and it just said screw it, and it lets you kind of use something big and heavy, and you shocked yourself and had a great day out of a bad day. That would have been most likely really dependent on like a nervous system situation and adrenaline, endorphins kind of stuff that isn't going to be replicable every single workout. So every day you go into the gym, you are not going to feel the same. You are not going to be pound for pound as strong every single time you go into the gym. You're not going to have, ounce by ounce, every ounce of energy the same every time you go into the gym. There are going to be variances just due to life. Changes in sleep, changes in food, changes in stress. All of that stuff comes into play in terms of maximum performance for strength. So if we know that we're not going to be at our best every single workout, then we shouldn't set a percentage that represents our absolute best and then hold ourselves accountable to that every single workout. And then all of a sudden we're disappointed or frustrated whenever some workouts don't go as well as others. And that's because we didn't allow that margin for a quote-unquote bad day. So that's the ideas, some of the concepts as to why it's good to set a little bit of a lower percentage. Does it have to be 90%? No, it doesn't have to be. But that's a pretty safe recommendation when you're talking to general population. So some things that change it are if you're brand new to lifting, your body is going to respond to almost any stimulus because it doesn't have a clue what's going on. So you might not need to use as low of a percentage because you're going to continue to get really good responses out of your body compared to somebody who's lifted for a long time. Their body's kind of used to lifting, and they're not going to get as awesome kind of responses to their training. So they're going to need a little bit of a lower percentage so that way they can allow for that. The other aspect we have is when you're newer to lifting, you're not going to be able to produce maximal force in your exercises. So your 1 rep max really isn't a representation of your true 1 rep ability. It's the best that you could express your 1 rep strength, but it wasn't the best of your actual strength. And what that means is maybe you don't know perfect technique yet. Maybe you don't know how to get your mindset in the right place. Like you get super excited for 1 rep max, but maybe super excitement isn't the best thing for you because maybe then you lose your form or you lose some of the cues or you get overhyped, and you just kind of blank out in your lift and you don't really pay attention to everything being perfect. So sometimes, and then also just, if you're thinking about bench press or squat or deadlift, if you don't know how to breathe and brace correctly, that can reduce your power output. So you might be pushing up what is your true 1 rep max. It is your 1 rep max currently. It's the most you've ever lifted, but it's not actually what your body's fully capable of. So what that's important for is 100%, your 1 rep max, would typically imply that it's 100% of what your body is capable of. So if you're newer to lifting and you still have technique to learn, your 100% of what you can express might really only be 90% of what you're truly capable of. So without you knowing it, by you running your programs at 100% of what you're able to express, you're actually really only at 90% of what your body's capable of. So you're automatically already putting yourself this 90% kind of guideline. So that's something to think of. And then also, the third factor is your strength levels. So if you're not very strong, then what you lift won't cause as much stress to your body. So if we think of this, if we have, just to say, a 180-pound male, and one can bench press 180, and we have another male who's 180 pounds, and he can bench press 360. So the dude benching 360 is going to get way more damage all throughout his body, good and bad. So muscle tearing that we would want for muscle growth and strength adaptation, nervous system stress, which we would want for strength adaptation, but they're also going to get joint stress. They're going to get overall tiredness and fatigue from lifting such heavier weights. So same thing if you have a female who's 150 and she's benching 110, 115, that's a lot different than a female who can bench 200. So if you're on the weaker side of things, don't worry, we've all been there, we've all started there. Some of us, like me, feel like we're always still there. But if you're on the weaker side of things, the amount of weight you're able to lift right now isn't as big of a shock to your body as somebody who's maybe a little more advanced in strength. So again, when you're giving general recommendations for the general public, you have to assume that there's going to be somebody of the lower end of strength and somebody of the higher end of strength. So if you're on the lower end, you might not need this 90% because you're probably not outputting maximal force, and your heaviness of weights are probably not very heavy for your body. So you might be able to run 100% for your programming. But as you get more experienced, as you get stronger, you'll find out that you're going to probably run into some joint pains, run into some energy variances from workout to workout, and all of a sudden you can't hit the numbers that you're supposed to. When that happens, when you feel things starting to falter in your training, you probably then want to consider dropping your quote-unquote 1 rep max that you're using for your programming down to even just 95% and see how it responds there. So this is a live and learn kind of thing. Everybody's a little bit different, but this gives you an idea of all the considerations that are in it, involved with why you'd pick 90%, or even just why you'd pick something other than 100. So are all these variance reasons. And then also there's individual differences, like we said, with how new you are to lifting, how well you are, how good you are, I guess, at producing maximal force, and then what's your general strength levels. So as I got stronger in powerlifting, so for example, when I first ever started lifting weights, I was 16. When I graduated college, high school, I remember I couldn't bench 225. I can now bench 430. I couldn't squat 315. I can now squat 600. And I couldn't deadlift 315, but I can now deadlift 700. So I've gotten twice as strong as I was when I was 18, and my training has changed enormously. So when I was younger and weaker compared to now, I would be able to come into the gym and go crazy and have awesome workouts all the time because the weights that I was able to lift weren't that stressful to my body. So it felt stressful at the time, so I would have told my current self to go kiss my butt if he said I wasn't working hard. It has nothing to do with how hard you're working. It's just what you're working with isn't that hard. So working with a 225 bench press is not as hard as working with a 405 bench press. And it doesn't mean that the 225 person's putting in less work. That has nothing to do with it. It's just when you move 405, that shocks your body more than when you move 225. So it's independent of the person, the quality of the person, or the work ethic of the person. It's just pound for pound. Moving 405 pounds is just harder on your body than moving 225. So as you get stronger, you're going to find that your beliefs now in training are going to have to modify and change a little bit. You'll probably have a lot right, but you might have to modify how you address certain things. So this is a little insight into that. So hopefully this was helpful, and even for people who don't do strength training, this is helpful for us to understand and just see all the considerations that go into our programming. So if we're expecting our quote-unquote best every single time we go to the gym, recognize that it isn't 100% possible all the time. So you can try for it, but be understanding when it doesn't happen. And then also understand that as your body changes, your programming should change. If you have a new body, you have to do new things. So be open to changing your programming. And here's a hint, if your programming hasn't changed, you're probably missing out on results. So what you did within the first 6 months of training is not going to work 6 years later or even a year later. So you have to do things a little bit harder, a little bit different. Try to modify your training as your body changes. Cool. So hopefully this was helpful. So if you don't want to listen to that and you just want to blast ahead at 100% because you're stubborn and you're exactly like I would have been when I was your age, younger. So I was a stubborn dude when I was younger. So go ahead and run your program at 100%. But if you run into the issues that we discussed, then start backing it down to 95% or even 90%. So if you're running into joint pain, performance, where you're not hitting the numbers you should hit, you're generally feeling fatigued, just frustrated, then bump that number down. You're still going to get stronger because you're still going to have progressive overload in your workouts. So if I'm lifting something 90% rather than 100% in terms of heaviness, so say I can really bench 315, but I decide to only bench 285. 285 is still heavy enough to kind of tear through the muscles. It's still heavy enough for me to practice my technique well. So it's not like if you take 10% off, then all of a sudden it's no longer difficult. So if I told you to go and bench your 90% of your 1 rep max, you're still have to put effort into that, right? You still have to pay attention, and you might even struggle with it. So just dropping off 5 or 10% will not reduce your progress. And like we said, is typically the reason why you're reducing the 5 or 10% is because you're not making progress at 100. You're getting too beat up, you can't hit your numbers, you can't get progressive overload. You're just going into the gym and hitting the same stupid numbers over and over again. So we all know the guy who comes in every Monday and 1 rep maxes every single week as if he expected to somehow get stronger than last week. And we all know that that guy comes up with the same bullshit excuse every week as to why his number didn't go up. Oh, the radio was playing Britney Spears, or, I heard somebody talking in the corner and they were distracting me. It's always somebody else and something else. So they don't recognize that if they came in and 1 rep maxed and then bullshitted with friends for an hour, they probably didn't get any stronger last week. So you have to have progressive overload. By dropping down that 5 or 10%, it gives you that room to come in and do something a little bit new, a little bit more every single week. Cool. Okay, I'll shut up, and hopefully that was helpful. To the listener that sent in that question, thank you. We love questions. So thank you very much. So to everybody else who hasn't sent in a question yet, please do. And if you have, keep sending them. It's fun. It's exciting to know at least one person will listen. So if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, you can sign up to become a patron of the podcast by donating $10 or more a month towards the podcast. And for your donation, we'll send you monthly training programming. And it's programming of your choice. So it can be a strength program, aesthetics program, overall health. It can be how to train with body weight at home. Really, there's anything. So we have a ton of varieties. And it's only $10 a month. It's updated every single month. Brand new exercises. And allows you to do that progressive overload. So if you'd like to become a patron, you can do so directly in the Podbean app. You can send us an email or do a Google search for Become a Patron, Brutal Iron Gym Podcast. And if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. So the more people we help, the happier the world will be. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. So like I said, this podcast is for you. So we want to know what you want to learn about. And you can reach us at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful. And thank you for listening.